Welcome everyone to Expanding Your Consciousness. Today is February 28th, 2023, and we are going to talk about divine order. Is there a divine order? And what I'd like to do tonight is do a bit of readings. I actually wrote what part of my view was in regards to divine order, but I also have some other things that people have written. I also would like to show a video by Archbishop Fulton Sheen. He did the Catholic Catechism, a series of talks, 50 of them, in 1965. And I just took excerpts from his very first talk in the Catechism, and I just thought related well to tonight's talk. So before we actually move into that, I would like to ask Faith, Kelly, and Daisy what their idea might be of divine order, or do they even think there's such a thing as a divine order? Faith, any comments?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I got an hour. I think that let's see, I think we have all of the realms inside of us, and I think that we periodically, temporarily tap into those realms, and it's ephemeral. It comes and goes. Who knows whether it's parts of our minds that are talking to us or actual beings, celestial beings, and other beings that are communicating with us, and that we've somehow opened up to those portals, to those realms and those beings. Yeah, I've asked the question from my own experience, and I still don't have the answer. Like, who are these beings that are communicating with me? Not there yet, quite, but I trust that one day it will come. That's my answer.
Okay, all right. Kelly?
Hi.
Hi.
I would say there's divine order. Yeah. I think that there is a way that I think that there is God. And I think that God has like an order in this world or in the universe. And I think, but my question is, why do a lot of people go against that order? That's kind of my question. I still haven't, well, okay, I have some answers, but I'm not even sure. I think some of those answers are correct, but I'm not sure if it answers the entire question.
Okay. And Daisy?
Yes, I think like you can name it whatever you like. You can call it a higher order, you can call it God, you can call it the spiritual realm, you can call it the universal realm, you can call it anything you like, right? People have different ways of expressing their belief in their gods, right? Right, but people have their own way of doing it, their own way of expressing their beliefs, and you can name it whatever you like, right? It can be called whatever that particular person wants to call it, and pay homage to it. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
So I think there's definitely a higher consciousness or higher state of being in this universe. Okay, it could be a spiritual, I believe that there's a spiritual belief or spiritual realm, definitely, because I experienced it in a physical manifestation. So yes, I feel it's very real, and that's why I came today to just share my experiences a little bit with people, that it's very, very real. It's true what they say about ghosts or spiritual beings existing, or angels, you can call it even angels, that manifest themselves. So it's very, very real. It's very, very true. It's not just in song and dance.
Yes.
Or it's not just expressed in song and dance and media or on the television. It's really true. It's really real, is my belief, and I've experienced it. Thank you.
Yes, and Daisy, if you have a chance, look at some of my earlier videos on expanding your consciousness, because I had similar experiences. So I've been seeking out people like you, Daisy. So, but we will get more into that tonight, hopefully. Kenny, welcome.
Hey, good to be back.
So I'm just asking, do you think that there is such a thing as a divine order? And I will be reading some definitions, what people think it is, and also I'm going to read something that I wrote in regards to that too. Any thoughts?
I want to hear your definitions first,
Oh,
because the problem with spiritual things is we all think we're talking about the same thing, but we're not. So Daisy just mentioned something about angels. So what is an angel?
okay.
Well, we better figure that out, and then I can say, oh, gee, I believe that or I don't believe it. But she might mean something entirely different than I mean. And apparently the Bible says there's only 3 angels, is it, or 2 angels? Then it also talks about ranks of angels. So we have all kinds of talk about it. But what is it? What are we talking about? What's the underlying meaning? And we don't usually go there.
Okay. All right. So should I just read maybe some of these things?
Yeah.
Okay. There is something that I found on a website called unity.org, but first I'm going to read what someone had written on another website. Divine order is alignment of all aspects of our lives. Comes from the inside out, meaning within our minds, our homes, our environment, our finances, our physicality, and our relationships. Having divine order in all aspects of our lives is essential and vital to the growth of our consciousness. And then on this website called unity.org, first of all, I guess I should ask, are there any comments about what that person wrote?
I have a comment.
Okay.
So divine order is the alignment of all aspects of our lives. So what does it mean by alignment of our finances? Does that mean our finances line up somehow with our diet, which is another aspect of our life and
Well,
our relationship?
when I look at that, you'll see that a lot of people are out of whack financially, right? They may be heavily in debt, that
Yeah.
puts their life out of alignment.
Yeah,
Right? So
that's true.
that's the way I look at it.
Well, that's true, but is that divine? Is there anything divine about normal human problems?
Well, I think our normal human problems, I think when we're connected to a divine source, we know to stay in alignment in all aspects of our life. Does anyone else have comments, or Kenny, you want to expand on that?
No, I'm just asking, because as soon as we talk about divine, we're outside of normal day-to-day activities. And this thing seems to want to think that definition talks about it as if it's just another ordinary thing. But there's people who tell you that there's no such thing as God and no divine this or no angels or no not. And they'll say all those things about aligning up your minds, your homes and everything. You do that, but that's nothing to do with divine. So it's important to really make sure we kind of know what we're talking about. And then we can figure out whether we agree or not.
Daisy, do you have any comments?
No, I just think there's different terminologies for the same vision or the same idea. Like people call it different things in their own country, right? In their own religion. They call it deity, they call it Allah in Islam. They call it all kinds of different Jesus, so there's all kinds of different terminology for it. So I think it's all the same, one and same ideology with different names and different terms. Thank you.
And Kelly? Oh, there's Faith.
Hi.
Kelly, okay. Any comments? From that definition, Kenny was saying it doesn't, he looks at the finances and all this and our environment, our homes and that, but how does that relate to the divine?
I agree with him.
Okay.
So I agree with what he's saying. Like we can have all that aligned, but how is that divine? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I agree with this question.
Okay. Faith, any comments?
No comment as right now.
Okay. All right, what I'm going to do is, so Kenny, we'll put that on the, we'll just set that aside right now. We may come back to that, okay? But I'm
Okay.
going to just read, first of all, read this website, this Reverend Gail Daubert wrote, and we'll just kind of see where this takes us. When life throws you into disarray, you can have faith in the law of the universe. It is all in divine order. How I often say those words. Sometimes when I say that phrase, I feel like I am being a little glib, just using it as a platitude instead of really embracing the full scope of what it means. Let's refresh our hearts and minds about what it means to say, believe, and experience, quote, it is all in divine order, unquote. Order is the law of the universe. There is a divine and perfect order to all life. To me, divine order is asking what is mine to do through prayer, and thus trusting and allowing that process to take place. I often end my prayers with, I let go, knowing it is so, and gratefully so it is. One of the most important aspects of prayer is releasing and trusting. One wouldn't think of digging up a seed that has been planted in the garden to see if it is taking root and growing. Prayer is a seed we plant, and order is the process of life unfolding within each seed. Can you remember a time when you have tried to dig up the seeds of your prayers instead of allowing the process of manifestation to occur? I certainly can. I must admit that I am at times an impatient person. I have a sense of urgency about most things. In other words, I like action. The funny thing is that fall and winter are my favorite seasons. They are seasons when it looks as if nothing is growing or changing on the outside, and yet all things are teeming with life inside as they prepare for spring. Trust and know this to be true in your own life. So, what I got from that is that there's a certain timing when it comes to divine order. And sometimes we go against that timing. We want things to go a certain way, or we want it quickly. And often we're trying to force something without allowing it to take root and to manifest. Any comments, Kenny?
I think there's two orders from the point of view of science, there's two orders, the creative order and the destructive order. And in fact, they've actually got a formula describing the destructive order. It's the second law of thermodynamics, something that they call it entropy. Entropy is that trip getting either more order or less order. So that's nature. So this is why I want to talk about divine order, because natural order has all the cycles and planting and winter and autumn and all that stuff. That's all natural, not divine. Unless you think divine is natural, maybe that's your definition. But I always think divine has to do with God and angels and devils and spiritual things, and it's different than natural things. So I agree that there's natural order, and we can talk about that in this is what science is all about, is figuring out that. But divine order, everybody has their own opinion. And sometimes these opinions are quite different from the next person's. So I think it's really important, but before we can make any sense of it, we've got to know what we're talking about. So what I'm talking about when I talk about divine order is spiritual things. And when I'm talking about natural things, that's nature, science, and science covers that pretty well. Is there crossover? And I don't know. So that's why this is a tough topic for me, because
But is
people have
it? Okay. No,
lots of great opinions, and actually quite valuable opinions, but they might not be really what talking about the same, we might not be talking about the same thing. So that natural order of saying, well, here we are, we're born, we have a life, and then we die. Is there an afterlife, and is there a heaven and a hell? These are all divine order questions. Whereas the ones listed on that page you've got up there about our homes, our environment, our finances, and all that stuff, that's not divine. That's good old-fashioned life.
Oh, okay. So what you're actually thinking, or this, what I'm getting from what you're saying, is that that person's definition of divine order is very materialistic. It's actually against the spiritual side of humans.
It's different from the spiritual side.
Yeah.
And the spiritual side, this is what I thought we were going to talk about tonight, is the spiritual.
Yeah.
But really, we're not. We're talking about physical and seasons and the coming and going of the crops and the seed, planting seeds and all that. That's fascinating. And that's where entropy enters. There's when a seed grows into a plant, then it takes water and minerals and sunshine and puts them together in the form of a plant. So that's order. Then when the plant dies and it rots, that's it going back to chaos. So that's a different kind of order, but that's all natural order. And that's real. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff. But there's also divine order. There is or there isn't, depending on what your beliefs are. And so I really like talking about divine order, but it's not that easy to find people.
But okay, so isn't nature, because you're talking about process of nature,
Yeah.
that is still part of the divine, like God created nature, right?
Well, some people don't think so. I mean, there's a lot of people who are atheists and agnostics and everything, and they have a perfectly wonderful appreciation of nature without a God.
Yes.
And there's others who say, no, it's all tangled in the same big ball.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it is. Say if it is, if you say you think nature and God are the same thing, or maybe nature is one expression of God, then you can say that, and then it makes sense. But no, I don't know. People, when Daisy talked about angels, well, are angels an expression of God just like nature is, or are angels separate things? Well, that's a cool thing to talk about.
Any more comments on that, though? What Kenny was saying. Kelly?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think Kenny has some really good things to say. I don't really have anything else to add, really, to that. I think that there is a divine order. I think that it's just that people need to be patient. Maybe if we're patient, then divine order will happen.
I'm thinking what someone just said recently, and he said, God has a plan for you. Like he's saying that to, everyone, right? God has a plan for
Right.
you. So I'm wondering, is that the divine order within the individual if you're in that flow
Yeah.
of God, if you believe in God? Any other comments? Daisy?
Yes, I'm here. I'm just listening.
Okay.
I'm just trying to figure it out. I think they're doing a scientific version of it, is what I'm kind of listening to, like a metamorphosis or change scientifically that happens mathematically or scientifically, but not spiritually. I think they're talking about.
Okay. Faith?
Yeah, it seems like science versus religion is the topic. We've switched to the topic of science over spirituality.
Well, are you thinking that's what Kenny was trying to say? Because I didn't get that.
Yeah, it seemed that way. What I could
Yeah,
tell.
I didn't get that sense that from Kenny that was taking the scientific approach. So,
No, I'm not taking it. I'm not, there's no difference. There's no verses in there. There's no, it's this against that. If you look at life that way, it doesn't work out very well.
yeah.
Or spirituality within science, I guess, or science within
They're both
spirituality.
separate things, and they're both useful for helping us live our lives.
What I'd like to do next is just read something I wrote in regards to this. And if you have any comments, you're welcome to express them. And then after that, I'd like to show that what I did, Kenny, you missed this at the beginning, but I took one of the Catholic Catechism talks of Archbishop Fulton Sheen. He did it in 1965. Now it was a 25-minute talk. I've gotten it down to 15 minutes, but I really like some of his comments in there. And so I just thought, you know, it's an audio, but I thought maybe we could discuss that as well. So I'll just start with what I had written first. Okay, so can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Okay, so what does divine order mean to me? As I am now 65 years of age and I reflect on my life, by the way, my birthday was on Saturday.
Yay, happy birthday.
Thank you. I have begun to understand that much of my life was going against divine order. What do I mean by that? Well, when I was in my teens and early 20s, I was very much influenced by television programs that promoted the single career woman who had her choice of men to date, but never really settled down by marrying and having a family. That seems so traditional and not progressive as was presented in the Mary Tyler Moore Show and Rhoda, two television programs directed at young women in the 1970s that showed women living unconventional lives as career women, dating handsome men, but never committing to a full-time relationship. But as my 60s approached and I reflected on my life, I realized that my life was spent working for agencies and government organizations where the next new face would come along and change everything that I had spent time and effort developing. So this has led me to wonder, if I had married and had children, would I have had something more rewarding in life? Would I have enjoyed life more? I think this is true. I remember my mother saying several times to her 6 daughters, "I am very proud of you girls." My sisters and I were the product of the tradition, and that tradition was family. This is not to say that my parents did not break with tradition by divorcing, but they did raise their family before they separated. All of my sisters had children. I did not. Now I realize that there are no guarantees in life and that there is the risk that one's children may not live up to what we had hoped. But I do think that part of the divine order is for a man and a woman to come together in marriage and to produce children in order to raise them into responsible and stable citizens. Also, I think that adult children have a responsibility to care for their parents in their old age. I know now so many single men and women who never married or had children, and they are living alone and have no one to care for them. I believe this was by design in order to weaken society, because then those who benefit can form their own order rather than the divine's plan for humanity. Now, it could be argued that not marrying and having children was part of my personal life plan set out by the divine. Maybe I was to learn certain things to share with younger generations. In all likelihood, this may be the case. Any comments? Well, first of all, Kenny, you did marry and have children.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's great.
Say that again.
it's great. It's a great thing to do.
Yes.
And I'm not so sure it's divine. But you could say that in our society, we're a Judo-Christian based society. So we follow those traditions and people have been following them for thousands of years. So sometimes we can think something social is divine, it's of God, but it might not be God. It might just be people, ordinary people. And maybe, there's some philosophers who would argue that people collectively are God. Oh, okay. Well, that's an interesting view. In that case, your approach of saying that marriage and a family is a divine thing, then that would be correct, and we could comment on that.
The reason that I'm kind of following up to what we did last week, and you weren't there, but or the last meetup, and that was about spiritual warfare, because we did talk about social engineering. And one thing that Dr. Richard Day said in regards to that, because he was an insider and he did a talk to a group of doctors in in 1969, and said, we will destroy the family. We will destroy relationships between men and women. It'll be very difficult for people to have children. We will increase abortion, right? He just went through the whole list of things, right? So when I reflect on my life, I realize that I think, these television programs about, single career women, well, isn't this great? This is very hip, was an attack on the relationship between men and women and the family.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a comment, actually,
Okay, Kelly?
Diane.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I was I lived with someone a long time ago. Came close to marriage several times, but it didn't happen. I've been with the same person though for 11 years, and we're good. We're happy. We don't have kids, so probably actually if we had met earlier in life, we might have. In fact, I'm pretty certain we probably would have. But we didn't, and I, I I don't really regret it. I think I don't know. Like I think that sometimes um, I think that sometimes God does intervene and takes you on a path away from that, because maybe God knows that you you have something else to do, and maybe also God knows that maybe you wouldn't be happy doing it. Well, not happy. I mean, nobody's ever 100% happy. But what I mean is that, it would maybe it's just not meant to be for
Yes.
that person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kelly, I do think that is true in some cases, but I also think for me to wake up to the fact that this was by design to influence
No,
us
I get it.
is another thing. But again, if you're raising your family, you often do not have time to figure out what's going on, right? You're just living life by the moment, trying to raise your family. So
You really are, yeah. And I see some people who have raised families, and maybe maybe they should have thought about it, a little more,
yeah.
right? You know, and I also see some people have raised families, and their children don't really turn out the way that their parents hoped.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, because I always say that you can give a child love, and you should 100%. You shouldn't abuse a child or mistreat it, so raise a child with all the love and support that they need. But the interesting thing is, even if you do that, there's no guarantee.
That's right. I
And
understand that. But I also think you
yeah,
have a society that has moved away from spirituality, has moved away from,
yeah,
uh,
I agree.
a sense of something higher or something greater, right? And so that has destabilized society too, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's made it difficult, because I think women did have that role to teach spirituality to their children, right?
yeah,
And now
yeah.
they're busy out there in the workforce.
Well, look at Muslim societies, for example, right?
Hmm.
Look at how cohesive they are.
Yes, that's right.
Like they really are. I mean, their children, for the most part, grow up to be good citizens, moral. Generally, I'm not saying all, but good morals most of the time. Not saying all the time. And that's probably because they grow up with a lot of tradition
Hmm.
and in a traditional community based society.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you, definitely. Like my mom she worked 3 days out of the week, but her boss would always allow her to take my sister and I to school and then pick us up from school. So her hours were from like 9 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. So that was a really real that was a boss who understood
That's right.
that being a mother was very important.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas
But
nowadays you have, a lot
you
of
wouldn't get
children
that.
in daycare centers and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So strangers are actually
Well, actually,
raising them more than the parents.
nowadays you have women in more authority roles, and it's not good. It isn't. They're not understanding, and they have very big egos, and
Well, I don't
it's
think all women
totally
are like that, but you may find it
no,
depends
I
on the
know.
person too, right? So
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm a little tough on women. Women should not rule. I think that's the disorder here.
so now
Women should
anyone
not
who
rule.
studied feminism will tell you that, it's all
Oh no,
about women moving into the public realm and not the private realm and all this sort of stuff, right? But yeah, there has been a big shift. So
I think
Yeah.
the world would be a better place if women were ruling the world, to be honest.
Oh God, no. I'm sorry. No. I I I really disagree with that.
I think men have messed it up, and I think it's time to let the women, for them to step aside and let the
Oh,
women take over.
no
Yeah, I
way.
think so too, like the
okay,
Amazon.
so
They
let
always
Daisy.
they always clean up the mess anyway after men. So what else?
Okay, all right, Faith.
I want out of that world when that happened.
Okay, all right. So I just want Daisy to give a comment if she has one.
Okay, so we're kind of going off topic. I
Yeah, we
think
are. Yeah.
I'm kind of getting confused actually.
I'm just kind of half
So
kidding
what
anyway.
was the,
What I was
Mhm.
focused on in regards to what I wrote is that and I know Kenny was saying nature's, kind of not a major part of divine order, whereas I was taking the approach I think it is. I think that, my view is I think that there is a spiritual side to us, and that one part of that is that we do marry, that we do reproduce, right? And that leads to a healthy society, right?
Mhm.
So, but again, due to
Mhm.
programming, especially through the media and through television, all this sort of thing, that
Mhm.
they've
I think,
tampered with that.
okay, yeah, I think I've got it. You know what? I think I don't know what's healthy and what's not anymore because society's ideologies have changed so much since the last 50 years. Like
That's right.
now there's interracial marriages, there's same-sex marriages,
Yeah.
there's test tube babies.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things that never existed in the olden days. I mean, the country days or, you know, those days. Like everything is a little bit more liberal. It's more, things are more acceptable. I don't know, it's just I don't think it's a norm anymore. Okay, I don't think it's a norm or normal for everyone to have a husband, wife, a man and a woman, and kids. I don't think it's the norm anymore. I think there's a lot of singles that chose to be single. I think there's people that don't want a partner, but they want a child without a partner. There's all kinds of scenarios. It's not set in stone anymore that, okay, you have to get married at this certain age, have a child in your 20s or early 30s, and raise a family, because also women are so emancipated, means they're now into the workforce and women have major careers that they put their career first, almost a lot of these women. And now sometimes the husband stays home and he does the wife duties. Okay, I've seen this with my clients. She's the doctor, she's the bread earner, he's staying home and he's the homemaker, you could say, or the domestic engineer, right? And so I've seen it with my clients because she's making more money than he is. So it makes more sense for him to stay home and take care of the family. And some people, they have double incomes, they don't want kids. Have you heard that? Double incomes, no kids. And so there's honestly no norm, no set pattern anymore.
Okay.
And you know what else?
Mhm.
Society has changed in the sense that children, older kids are going back home to live with their parents because there's an affordability factor that has set in this decade where people cannot afford to live by themselves necessarily, or they can't afford to own their own home. So they go back and live in like a joint family with their parents and they take the kids with them. I've seen this.
Yeah.
So it's
Stacy,
all
can
different.
I just
It's
ask
not
you something though?
Yes,
Do you think this is
sure.
by design? Do you think it's done on purpose?
No. Yes and no, both. Some is, some isn't. Like some, for some societies, it is intentional and that's how they want to live. And for some people, it's not intentional and they just have to do it that way economically. And for some people, like single women that have a good career, for example, maybe they don't want to get married anymore. Maybe they don't want to have children anymore. Maybe they just want a partner without children. I think it's so individual now. It's not a norm where you settle down, have kids, and raise a family anymore because women are working in the workforce. They have their own money. She can leave him anytime if she has a good career and she has her own money. She
Okay.
doesn't need a man to support him like they are used to be.
Okay.
So the
Except
norms
that
have shifted. It's different. That's
do
all.
you
Mhm.
think that there are certain
Uh-huh.
populations in Canada and in Europe and in North America that will not exist 100 years from now?
Well, Nostradamus, Nostradamus, the guy that predicted things, he said the world might be coming to an end maybe in 60, 50 years from now or something like that. I was watching that. I can't remember, but he gave a year. I forgot the year. I wrote it down. So there's things like agriculturally that things aren't working with the food or economically in the universe, or there might be some disease like the bubonic plague, or there might be some problem with our food system because there might be some insects or something that permeate the earth. It's really what he said was made sense because it's happened in history too. Like the bubonic plague existed. So you never know, like maybe mankind is coming to an end. Who knows when? Maybe the world will come to an end. Maybe there will be, what's that? Armageddon or something. What's that word? So Nostradamus predicted this. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a famous predictor from the turn of the century.
Yeah.
Right.
And-
So I don't know. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Well, the only reason
Yeah, society's
mentioned
just
that,
changed.
but it's changed, and this is,
Pardon me?
there is evidence of this, right? That they purposely, the elite group that runs the money system and runs our governments and all this, and the media and that,
Mhm.
purposely
Mhm.
social engineered society so that
Mhm.
women, primarily women of European background and that, no longer want to have children, that they'd have careers, all this sort of stuff. They pushed, homosexuality on the population. I mean, he even said that in 1969, right? We will, this is what we're going to do. So you see what has played out in society.
I think partially it is intentional, but yeah, the elite have something to do with it too, because they're controlling the purse strings, right?
Yes.
And they're controlling things. But then, also, okay, but also in Hollywood, like there's been a lot of movements happening with, what's that called? Those movements that Hollywood has started, Me Too movements
Yeah,
and
Me
Black
Too.
Lives
Yeah,
Matters
yeah.
movement,
But that's all financed by them, right?
right? There's
Soros,
lots of,
Soros financed, George Soros financed Black Lives Matter. They do all this Me Too stuff and all this, right? But again, it's just, them keeping us busy and distracted while they carry out their full agenda, right? So, but anyway,
yeah.
Daisy, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just think societies, realms, and ideologies have shifted. I think, and also the oddest thing is, what they did for the abortion rights in America? I think that should be turned around. I think that went a little backwards, the abortion rights in America. So that was kind of shocking that took a turn like that. But I think that, yeah, like there's different ways to look at this, like because women have some women, like a lot of women have good careers nowadays. They have their own money, own say, and if they're not happy in a relationship, they just leave. Like they don't have to stay in a relationship that they're not happy.
Daisy,
that's all.
What about the whole idea that sometimes relationships have to go through rough periods? That's how you strengthen the relationship. Or is everything just disposable now? Oh, he's made me angry, I'm leaving.
Well, it's true that a lot of things have become disposable, like materially. That's a funny word, but materially, a lot of things have become disposable. I know it's a funny word, but it's true. So I think relationships are going towards that realm, towards that direction, or what is that word called? That there's a word, trajectory, that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I think things are going towards that direction. That it's relationships are, I think, falling apart in the newer generations. There's a lot more divorce rates. And maybe a lot of people just don't want the burden of having kids, honestly, and the financial strain also of having children nowadays. Maybe that's part of it too. I know people that they want a second kid, but they can't afford it. They want maybe a second, third child or second child, but they can't afford to have one.
But throughout human history,
I've heard that
people have had to struggle financially and they still manage to have 5 to 7 kids or more.
Yeah, but that was in the olden days. That's more so in the olden days when that was their ideology, right? I think that's how they thought back then. But I think everyone is thinking differently in today's world. If they fall in love, people fall in love.
But Daisy, are we more focused on material things rather than people?
It could be. It could be. Yeah, I think maybe you're right. Maybe it could be, It's a real juggernaut. Like you gotta really think about this and all the different, I think in Europe and North America, I don't know about the poorer countries, but I think maybe we have more freedoms. We're more liberal to do as we please than some of these communist countries like Russia, or poor countries like Asia, Malaysia, and China, because those are more communistic countries. I think China's still communistic, if you ask me, you know.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Okay, thanks.
Faith, is there anything you want to add?
I would say I agree with your synopsis on the whole societal engineering. Yes, it is social engineering that what's happening now, the whole culture, the pop culture, and all the stuff, rather disturbing things that we see nowadays. It's all been planned that way. That's how I feel.
Okay. What I'd like to do now, if I'm just asking for 15 minutes of your patience, and I just want to show that one clip of Archbishop Fulton Sheen talking. Actually, it is an audio. Sometimes it's hard to pick up his voice in certain parts of it. So I'll increase the sound a bit, see if that will help a bit, okay? And we still have maybe about 20 minutes, so we'll take a few extra minutes past 8:30 if we have any comments.
Well, there are two ways of waking up in the morning. One is to say, "Good morning, God," and the other is to say, "Good God, morning." We are going to start with the second. We will start a long way back. And people who wake up that way have an anxiety about life. I suppose their life might be characterized in two ways. First of all, to them it seems rather absurd. And considerable literature is being produced today on the absurdity of life. Now, this is the way some people live. And along with this sense of absurdity, there is also a drift. Many minds are like Old Man River. They just keep floating along. No goal. Just a kind of an arrow without a target. Pilgrims without a shrine. Journeys at sea without any kind of a port. Now, what is the common conclusion of people who wake up and say this? Good God, morning. I think the common characteristic of them all is life has no meaning. It is without purpose, without goal, without destiny. So it's possible to find one's way out of this absurdity. But now let's come to a question which interests all psychiatrists and interests all of us. What is the difference between a normal and an abnormal person? The difference is this. A normal person always works toward a goal or a purpose. The abnormal person looks for escape mechanisms, excuses, rationalizations in order to avoid discovering the meaning and purpose of life. That is the difference. The normal person sets for himself a target. For example, in this life, a young man might want to be a doctor or a lawyer. But beyond that, there's something else. Suppose you ask, what do you want to do after you become a doctor? Well, I want to marry, and then raise children, and then be happy, and then make money, give money to my children, and then there comes the last, and then. The normal person knows what that and then is. The abnormal person, however, is locked up within the barrel of his own ego. He's like an egg. He's never been hatched. He refuses to submit himself to a certain amount of divine incubation in order to arrive at a different life than he has. Now, what are some of the escapes of the abnormal person? Because that's the way he spends his time. If he wants to go, for example, from New York to Washington, he isn't concerned about Washington. He's concerned about giving excuses why he doesn't go to Washington. Now, just to mention a few of these escape mechanisms of the abnormal person. One, love of speed. I believe that an excessive love of speed, or should I say, a love of excessive speed, is due to a want of a goal or purpose in life. So they do not know where they're going, but they certainly are on their way. And there may even be an unconscious or half-conscious desire to end life because it is without purpose. Another escape would be sex, throwing oneself into business in an abnormal kind of way in order to have the intensity of an experience atone for a want of goal or purpose. One of the very famous psychiatrists, Dr. Young, said that after 25 years of experience of dealing with mental patients, I would say that at least 1/3 of my patients had no observable clinical neuroses, but all of them were suffering from a want of the meaning and purpose of life. And not until they discover that will they ever be happy. In other words, the vast majority of people today are suffering from what might be called an existential neurosis. The anxiety and the problem of living. The answering of the question, what is it all about? Where do I go from here? Now, how find it? I know what you're thinking. Now you're thinking, now he's going to tell us to get down on our knees and pray to God. No, I'm not. I may say that a little later on, but I'm not going to tell you that now. And why? Because people who have an existential neurosis are too far away from that for the moment. I'm offering two solutions. First, go out and help your neighbor. Those who suffer from an anxiety of life do so because they live only for themselves. Their mind, their heart, each has been dammed up. And all of the scum of the river of life makes of the heart and mind a kind of a garbage heap. And the easiest way out of this is to love people whom you see. If we do not love those whom we see, how can we love God whom we do not see? Visit the sick. Be kind to the poor. Help the healing of lepers. Find your neighbor. And the neighbor is someone in need. Once you do this, you begin to break out of the shell. You discover that your neighbor is not hell, as Sartre says. That your neighbor is part of yourself and is a creature of God. Not very long ago, there was a father brought to me his young son, a very self-wise, conceited, young delinquent who had given up his faith and was bitter with himself and everyone whom he met. The next day, the boy ran away from home. He was away from home for a year. The boy came back as bad as ever. And the father brought him to me and said, "What shall I do with him?" I said, "Send him to school, but not in the United States." So I recommended another school. Now, do not write and ask me what that school was. I recommended a certain school to him, and about a year later, the boy came back to see me. He said, "Would you be willing to give me moral support for an enterprise that I have undertaken in Mexico?" He said, "There's a group of boys in the college where I am who have built a little school, and we have gone all around the neighborhood and brought in the children to teach them catechism. We have also brought in a doctor from the United States once a year and for 1 month to take care of all of the sick people of the neighborhood." And I said, "How did you become interested in this?" Well, he said, "The boys went down there during the summer, and I thought I would go down too." And he recovered his faith and his morals and everything else in his neighbor. It is the poor, the indigent, the needy, the sick, fellow creatures of God, who give to us great strength. Some years ago, there was an Indian who went into Tibet. He went in to do a little evangelizing of that non-Christian country. And he took with him a Tibetan guide. In the course of the trip, they got very cold, crossing the foothills of the Himalayas. They sat down, exhausted, almost frozen. And this Indian, whose name was Singh, said, "I think I hear a man moaning down there in the abyss." And the Tibetan said, "Well," he said, "you're almost dead yourself. You can't help him." And Singh said, "Yes, I will help him." So he went down, dragged the man out from the abyss the best he could, and carried him to the nearby village, and came back completely revived. Revived by that act of charity. And when he came back, he found his friend, who refused to aid the neighbor, frozen to death. So the first way to escape the anxiety of life is to find your neighbor. The second way is to leave yourself open to experiences and encounters with the divine, which will come to you from without. I say, leave yourself open. Your eye does not have light. Your ear has no sound or harmony. Food of your stomach comes from without. Your mind has been taught. Your radio pulls in unseen waves from the outside. And therefore, allow this hole in your head, this hole in your heart, to receive certain impulses that come from without, that will perfect you. No matter how far away you be from what I'm talking about, they will still come.
I just want to say that was beautiful. Thank you.
I know there's one talk where he actually talks about the fact that God is order, and that when we're in alignment, we follow a certain order of things. But I really like the fact that he gets into the whole idea of, helping others, right? That's important, that the focus is on people and not so much material things. And not so much on ourselves, right? Which, if you look at society, it's very much focused on the self.
I actually think it's going kind of the other way, though, with the younger generation.
That they're focused on people.
Yeah, I think the young ones, not people like in their middle age like me. No, but I think that the much younger ones, yeah, I think it is going the other way a little bit. Yeah.
And what makes you think that, Kelly?
Just when I'm out, and I'm out a lot, and you see, younger people offering to help all the time. And I know a girl, and she's like 21, but a few years ago she was in university, and she was living at university, and she had a physical disability some days where she had trouble moving. Just sometimes. It's a rare disorder that she had, but most of her dorm mates would totally 100% help her. They always helped her out.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything you want to say about them?
I missed the whole last half. I couldn't understand what he was saying.
Oh, okay. Because I know the sound wasn't strong, but
That's
he
the
was
way
really.
He speaks loud and then soft and then loud and then soft.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work as if
I
you're using
know. And unfortunately, when I was because I could have increased the sound when I took the clip. But when I was listening to, I had my headphones on. Big difference with the headphones on than listening without. So I apologize for that. But really, what he was saying is that when we break out of our shells, right, and our focus on ourselves, and we focus on our neighbor or others, right, that actually helps us to find some
Definitely.
purpose in life. So he gives an example of a juvenile delinquent, and the father, took the kid to Archbishop Sheen and said, no, I can't deal with him, that sort of thing. And he suggested to the father that you send him to a school outside of the United States. And so he does that, and the boy meets up with some, students in the school, and they do some work in Mexico. And so the boy goes back to Archbishop Sheen, or at that time he was a priest, and says, oh, would you give me moral support, or, for this project I want to do to help children in Mexico. And so that's what he does. He had learned to not think about himself, but to actually think about other people, right? And so he grew, spiritually, he grew, like morally, that sort of thing, through that experience.
Yeah, what a great idea.
Yeah, it's really neat. Actually, I will say that there are still a lot of very helpful people.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dee. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Diane.
And Faith, anything you'd like to say?
Hold on a second. I'm just trying to unmute.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that there's still kind people in the world as well. But even my clients lately and people I talk to in general, like I'm trying to get their perspective on things. So like they say, like, oh yeah, people have gotten nastier in the last 3 years. People have changed. So I don't know, something has changed. I don't know. It's I've noticed it as well. People are angrier, they're more stressed, more, yeah, generally. I've been dealing with it in my practice as well. So yeah, just something that I've noticed.
In relation to the talk by Archbishop Sheen, what did you think?
Very inspiring, and I agree 100%. I think that's an old-fashioned belief system. But I mean, in terms of like the new era that we're in, where it's focused on self, right?
Yeah.
But I think that there are people that are still like that, that are pockets of that are people are kind and
Yeah,
generous.
I agree.
I am that way, so yeah, I am that way. Thank God.
I go to a lot of different places every week, and for the most part, I see it. Yeah, definitely. It's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think it's there. I thought it was interesting because, Daisy was talking about, well, women in the workforce, and she makes more money than him, but everything that was listed related to material things, right? Well, she can leave him whenever she wants if she's not happy and all this. So the focus was on the career woman rather than looking outside of herself and her career and what's for the greater good of society overall, right?
Yeah.
So I just thought that was kind of interesting because Archbishop Sheen's approach was the opposite of that, right? And also, people should be aware of the fact that there were some situations in cities in the US, especially in Florida and that, whereas if people wanted to feed the poor or give money to the poor, this happened in the UK too. They bring laws in place to stop you from doing that. Now someone has to examine, why would they do that? Why would they want people to stop giving to the poor, feeding the poor?
That's wow.
Why?
That's just crazy. That's so
Why would they
crazy.
do that? Or if you wanted to feed the poor, you had to get a permit to feed
What?
the poor,
A
to set up
permit?
a tent and to, set up things to give them food. right? So, wow. Because
Wow.
I think it's empowering for us to help others, right? And it's within our nature, our divine nature, that we want to help others, right? So,
Yeah.
just some final comments. Kenny, anything you'd like to add?
There was one thing back before Bishop Sheen. We were talking about, there was a disagreement between Kelly and I think it was Daisy regarding whether men should rule or women should rule. It was kind of a cool, interesting thing. And in the shamanic tradition of the South, in Mexico and northern South America, the tradition was that the women ruled the village. The women were in charge of the home, and a collection of homes is the village, and that was the realm of the women. And the men were the hunter-gatherers in these primitive societies, and their job was to go out and hunt.
And
So
to protect,
yeah,
right?
protection was another thing too.
Yes.
So that was their natural order. I don't know if the natives of northern Canada do the same thing. I've never heard that. But in the South, that was it. That was the way it was, and it was called a matriarchal tradition instead of a patriarchal. Okay, so it was part of different societies at different times. Well, I guess
But the focus was still on the woman's value within the home, right?
yeah,
They may work as a collective, but the value is still on raising the children
yeah,
and
Yeah.
building up
Yeah.
their society.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was
No,
reality, and the patriarchal system, based on Judeo-Christian tradition, has it the other way around, where the men dominate and rule the roost and all that, and that's just another form of society. Which is better? Well, I don't know. You figure it out.
Well, I just look at the fact that we came from large families, European background. They came here, they settled the land, this sort of thing. We've, I mean, we managed this far, and now and now you have people saying, oh no, I want a big house and a fancy car and forget having kids. I can't afford that because I want to afford my fancy car and my big house, right?
I think if I can just add interject, I think, well, one of the reasons I said what I said earlier was because I see how dysfunctional women have become, and I think it's just because of the disorder in our society, the fact that it's not we're totally going against God's order, and I don't mean all women, and but generally, yeah. How many single moms and how many are working jobs and raising kids?
Yeah.
It's just not, it's not good for women either. It's not.
Okay. And Faith, final words, and then we'll end this meeting.
No, I'm just listening.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you. I know we kind of covered a lot of different things, but that happens in these meetups, right? Where we pick a certain theme and it may, go in different directions. But I do think there was a valuable discussion tonight and some, good information. And I do thank all of you for participating tonight. Daisy did leave us because it was getting late for her, so that's why.
Yeah, it's
earlier.
late here too.
Yes,
So.
thank you, Kelly, for staying up. All right, good night.
Good night.
Good night,
Night.
guys.
Night,
Good
night.
night. Bye.
Bye-bye.